It's fair to say that the technical legal term for how the Mueller team appears to be feeling is pissed. And there's something deeply wrong about, releasing a clearing document in a couple of pages and then not providing any of the other information. You can go to a court and get the permission for the grand jury material to be given to Congress. It's easy to do. Barr's had 13 days and counting to do that. He hasn't done that, but within 48 hours, he felt perfectly comfortable being, acting in a hurry to clear President Trump. So, there's a real mismatch here, and it really does feed this idea that Barr is the president's guy, not the people's guy.
Here we are, more than 2 years after our friend Neal Katyal, who's the only person who's things he says on live TV actually sound better 2 years later, raised those suspicions about Bill Barr. Today, confirmation from the American justice system that they were, at the time, well-founded and prescient. Judge Amy Berman Jackson issuing what amounts to a rebuke, a rare rebuke, of a former Attorney General, Bill Barr, admonishing him for his aforementioned disingenuous public summary of Robert Mueller's findings and for evidently never intending to prosecute his boss no matter what. Joining our conversation is Neal Katyal, former acting Solicitor General and Georgetown law professor. Carol Leonnig is here, Washington Post national reporter, both lucky for us MSNBC contributors. Neal, people like yourself seem to just intuitively know what was going on. Why does it take so long for sort of the grinding of the wheels to make public what is, I guess, was to you obvious at the time, that Barr was lying when he came out and misrepresented Mueller's conclusions, and those lies had, we'll never know the sort of political damage they did to the country and his voters?
Well, Nicolle, I don't think I'm not sitting here feeling good about the fact that I and so many others were right 2 years ago. I mean, I desperately wanted to be wrong. And our system is set up to trust the Attorney General. I mean, this Barr was the Attorney General of the United States, not the Attorney generally for President Trump. That's what he was supposed to be. He was supposed to be for the people. But unfortunately, there was always a degree of corruption around him, and he constantly acted like one of Donald Trump's personal attorneys. And now with the new decision by the judge into his deception, he's finally being treated like one of the gang, which he always was. And, this is the Justice Department. It's not the Interior Department or some other place that's been historically plagued by scandals. I mean, this is kind of the crown jewel of our democracy. It's a place that historically has run in the people's interests, not in the interests of the president. And what you have in this decision by the judge yesterday, by Judge Amy Jackson, who's a meticulous judge, is a statement that no, Barr actually lied to the court and to the American people. She called, Barr's actions in the litigating position disingenuous, which is something you almost never hear a federal judge say about any litigant, particularly not someone from the Justice Department, and particularly not the Attorney General of the United States. And if a federal judge calls your testimony before Congress disingenuous, as she did, I think it's time to start thinking about retaining counsel, legal counsel, and ideally someone who can save whatever is left of that tattered reputation that you have.
Let me press you there, Neal Katyal. What does Bill Barr need legal counsel for? Who could try to hold him accountable legally?
Well, I think, this is true about every attorney who surrounded themselves with Donald Trump. They run into criminal liability. You see it, we'll talk about Giuliani a little bit later. You see it time again, Michael Cohen, all these other people. And now Judge Jackson is saying in this opinion, Barr, you testified before Congress. Your testimony before Congress was that you had, made these decisions. Now it looks like you actually didn't make these decisions. And this material you're trying to prevent from the American people from seeing, you claimed was shielded because you hadn't made the decisions at the time, but it looks like you did. And so there is the possibility of a criminal investigation into Bill Barr now. There's also the possibility of civil and disciplinary actions against him as well. I mean, the Attorney General of the United States is supposed to be above reproach. And here you have the top lawyer for the entire government being accused of being disingenuous by a incredibly well-respected federal judge in Washington, D.C. And I think, Nicolle, most interesting, this isn't the first federal judge even to say this about Bill Barr. Before we had Judge Reggie Walton. Right. Yeah. And right. Judge Emmett Sullivan, right. too.
Right. I mean, so, Carol, that is really the extraordinary piece of this. So it wasn't the first time or the second time. This was the third time Bill Barr was rebuked by a federal judge. I wonder if you can just widen the lens a little bit. I remember when Bill Barr, was just a colonel in the Trump Twitter feed and arrived. And there was, even among Democrats, a school of thought that thought he might land on sort of the thinking right-wingers side of the ledger, like a Terwilliger sort of figure. And then there were a few who said, no, this is like Don Bongino or whatever his name is becoming the country's AG. He landed squarely on the, talk radio kind of legal impulses and political impulses and just blanket loyalty to Donald Trump. And I wonder if you think stories like this and sort of this slow emerging picture of what happened behind the scenes is going to get worse, or do you think we know most of what happened?
I'm so glad you asked that about the last part, which is, do we know the whole story? Because I actually think the most interesting thing about this is what we don't know. And Amy Berman Jackson, revealed as much as she could of a document that's currently still highly redacted. She reviewed it, so she knows a lot more than we do, and she gave us those clues. But I'll get to that in a minute. Everybody should kind of remember that Attorney General Bill Barr was, when he first arrived, viewed as this eminence grise, a person of seriousness and gravitas. People were elated that the Attorney General that Donald Trump had gotten fed up with was going to be replaced by somebody as serious as Bill Barr. However, he did end up looking often as if he was essentially doing the president's bidding. I think what people misunderstood about Bill Barr in the first moments was that because he'd been Attorney General before, that he would be vested with all of the same feelings that, for example, Neal Katyal and many of my prosecutor sources feel, which is justice is always blind, justice is always objective. What people misunderstood was that Bill Barr is a political ideologue, a political street fighter, one who felt very strongly coming in that the Mueller investigation was bunk, that it was a process violation, essentially, that they had caught the president in. And so keep in mind what Barr had going for him was he got to say the first word about the Mueller probe. He got to define what they found. And he essentially decided they didn't find very much. The truth is they found plenty. Here's the last part, if you don't mind, Nicolle. Amy Berman Jackson has this great point in her ruling in which she says that essentially she's describing this 2019 memo that Bill Barr and his team said they could never reveal as a post hoc rationalization. So what was really going on? Why in the world was the Justice Department pointing to this document in 2019 as so important and so deliberative that it could never be shared, if indeed it was just a rationalization after the fact? What is going on in those deliberations, and what is possibly sort of behind that fig leaf? Not just the document, but all the other documents that we've not yet been able to see. I'm certainly, pulling out the Rolodex to figure it out.
Neal, we want to venture to guess what's in the document?
I'm not going to venture to guess. We do know that Judge Jackson has actually read the document itself, and her opinion was informed by it. The Justice Department resisted that, but she was able to read it. So I think time will tell, and I don't want to speculate, but my guess is it's not looking good for Bill Barr.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.